Welcome to geometry. Before you begin studying the concepts that are in the course of geometry, we want to take a look at communication and how you're going to interpret pictures and figures. We're going to start with points. Points are simply ways to locate a specific location, and they're identified with single letters from our alphabet. For example, that dot is now point A, point B, C. They're always labeled with letters. Now, in a picture, you never repeat the same letter twice because every point is unique. So I couldn't use A, B, or C again, but I could call the other points in this particular picture other names. If I want to draw someone's attention to a particular point, I could say point C, and then they would know to go right to that location. If I want someone to pay attention to several points, I would list them with commas between. For example, maybe I wanted someone to look at point T, point S, and point R. So you list them. Next, you might run into lines. Lines you will always identify because of the arrowheads on the end of the straight figures. Lines also have names, so you can draw someone's attention to a particular line in a picture. There are two ways to do this. One is you pay attention to the particular points that are located on a line. These red points right here are indicating the location of each point. But if I want to call that line by name, I only use two of those points. For example, this could be line AB, or I might call it line BC, or I could call it line AC. I could even read the letters from right to left instead of left to right. I could call it line CB. I always put the little miniature line symbol above the letters that I use to call it by name. This symbol right here indicates that when I'm using those two letters, someone should look for a picture of a line with the arrowheads on it. And those particular letters. Any one of those names indicate the same line. Now, this other line down below that has no points on it at all also can be called out by name, but it's a little more generic. I would call this line M. And then everyone would know to look for this particular setup in a picture. I want to point out one more thing very quickly. In this particular picture, I have two different lines. I have line PC, and I also have line K. This K, this particular letter, is not a located point. So I cannot say that the letter K is a point because it's not attached to a dot. And this is something you always remember. It's just a generic name that enables me to identify a particular line. Rays. A ray actually comes from a line. It's where you have actually broken off one of the arrowheads, which gives the ray a starting point. This particular ray starts right here. Let's give that a name. Now it's a location, it's a point. It starts at A, and this particular ray runs through point B. It has a direction. What I call this ray is AB. The A has to come first because that's where the ray starts. I cannot call this ray BA because it doesn't run in that direction. It does not start at B. Really important. Down below, let's say that's point R, and this is point S. This ray is called RS. and the little ray symbol that goes above it still runs to the right. It doesn't matter. The picture will show you the direction through which it goes. This is just simply saying it starts at R, and wherever S is, it runs through it. Segments. Segments also come from lines, and it's when you've actually broken off both of the arrowheads and you end up with like a stick that you could actually measure. Now, these segments have names, but the names come from the end points only. You ignore all the letters or points in between, they're just on that line segment. So this particular line segment is simply called line segment AC or line segment CA. 2 letters. I'm ignoring the letter B. You just pass right over it. If I talk about line segment AB and I put the little line segment symbol above it, then I'm only talking about a very small portion of that picture. I would just be talking about this part right here. That's a much shorter line segment than from A all the way to C. This line segment down here, this is called line segment DE or ED. And notice the little symbol that I put above it. If there was no picture on this particular page of what we're looking at, but I wrote line segment DE, then you should be able in your imagination to conjure up that picture of a line segment, and it would have endpoints that would be D and E. So given this, you could draw the picture, or given the picture, you could write the name. Angles. Now, angles are one letter more complicated than lines, line segments, or rays. Lines, line segments, and rays only took 2 letters to name them or call them out by name. Angles require 3 for their formal name. For example, if we look at this picture, that is one single angle. The angle's name is angle. You use a little tiny angle symbol, the letter A, the letter B, and the letter C. Or I could call it angle CBA. But I want you to notice where the letter B is located in each of the names and the picture. Look at that. B is the middle letter. It is at the vertex of the angle. It's where the 2 rays come together. It always has to be in the middle. Now, just to make sure you understand what a ray is, when we talk about a ray, we're talking about, an angle, made up of 2 rays. It is actually this interior space right here. It's always measured in degrees. The angle is always made of 2 rays that meet at a particular vertex. They share a common endpoint. You can also name an angle by putting a numerical value in the middle of it, which has nothing to do with degrees. So for example, I could call this angle 3, and I could write its name like angle 3, and then people could look at this picture and they would know I'm talking about this angle. Now, in the picture to the right, you have more than one angle happening, all sharing the same vertex, point E. Now, I could call these angles by name. For example, angle DEG, and that would be the angle on the left, the smaller one. I could have you look at angle GEF. Or maybe I want you to look at angle DEF. Could you find each of those angles as I wrote the letters? There's another way to do this when your picture's more complicated. I definitely cannot just say angle E in this picture because there's too many angles happening at E. I could put a 1 right here, and then everyone would know where angle 1 is located. I could put a 2 right here, and then I could talk about angle 2, and everyone would know where that angle is located. Now, in both of these pictures, you have angles. In the picture on the left, over here, I could also call it simply angle B, because it's only one angle in that picture, and that wouldn't be confusing. But over here, I can't just say angle E because there's too much going on. So be careful when you're communicating and or working with angles in geometry figures. Now, given this particular picture, you should be able to see a lot of things. You should see lines. There are 2 of them. And there are 3 bunches of different ways, more than 3 different ways to name those individual lines. There are angles. They're everywhere. Can you name them? There are line segments. You could identify particular little line segments or longer line segments. You can identify rays. This is what you want to be able to do to pick a picture apart in geometry, because geometry is all about problem solving and communication, and you have to be very clear about what you're doing.